Hello and welcome to another episode of Seidea Video Careers Interview. I am so excited because we're joined again with a very important guest. But before I go any further, I'm just going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Sherifah Lahan.
Thank you, Sherifah, for joining us and, spending time with us today. We really appreciate it. So I'm going to start with the first question, and that is, what is your current role and how did you start your journey into cybersecurity?
Okay, thank you. So I am an energy cybersecurity advisor within government. And in terms of my journey, so it's been an interesting one, I guess. So I started off, I've got a legal background, so I did a law degree, and then in terms of going into government, I started off doing litigation work. So I was doing litigation work for basically defending decisions made by the government. Did that and then transitioned into national security. So I did a number of cybersecurity roles, most notably working on different policies. So things like investigatory powers policy, and then I also worked on data protection in relation to how the security services utilize data. And so through that I was able to transition into what is now my energy cybersecurity policy role.
Thank you. I think that's quite interesting because, like you said, you didn't have a cybersecurity or like the traditional cybersecurity background. You started with legal, but because you had the opportunity to work in data protection, it was easy for you to kind of scoot over and move into cybersecurity.
Yeah, certainly. In government, it's classed more as, as national security, in the national security kind of career field. So, working in data and in national security has definitely helped me to segue into cyber. Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is quite interesting because normally with this question, I normally ask what is your certification, da, da, da. But I know especially with the UK government, it's a bit different, especially since you're looking at competencies. So what would you say employers are looking for when they're recruiting for this role? And I think what I like is that your background is public sector. So it's what are public sector organizations looking for?
Yeah, so in terms of public sector organisations, I would say, depending on obviously what grade you are and what, are you leading a team or, what your job specifically would be. In policy, for example, they want you to be able to understand, the bigger picture. How are you analysing what the risks are in your sector, and in order to be able to make decisions, to counter that risk, how do you engage with stakeholders? So there's a lot of stakeholder engagement, as you can imagine. We work a lot with industry, we work with, other government departments. So how do you, manage stakeholders? How do you communicate? So communication skills are very important as well. When you go more towards leadership, it's what are your leadership skills like? How do you lead a team? So things like that, I would say, are the skills that they look for in terms of recruiting for specifically policy roles. Now, there are technical, obviously, cyber roles as well, which in that case, then your cyber qualifications and things like that would be, relevant. But yeah, I'd say those are the main kind of competencies, as you're aware, that you would require to get in the public sector.
Okay, I think from what I picked up, it was more of risk management, stakeholder management or stakeholder engagement, and being able to collaborate with others and leadership skills. Yeah. So I think that's quite interesting because I think with policy, people don't really, I feel like it's one of those careers that people don't really understand what it is. Yeah. So I think it's nice that you're able to kind of bring out these skills because there are so many roles that you're able to kind of gain these skills and then transfer it to cybersecurity.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of transferable skills. Into cyber, into policy, how well do you make decisions, how, quickly do you work, and how good of a thinker are you? So things like that, I think, definitely transferable aside from the qualifications that you would require. So yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to our third question, and I'm a bit curious about this as well because I've heard different thoughts, but you are our first public sector person on our platform. So I'm interested to know from your point of view, what are the current trends you see in the cybersecurity jobs market at the moment?
Okay. From my perspective, and again, it's very, limited, not limited, but it's more focused on public sector, and mine specifically working in the energy sector. So my role is essentially ensuring that there's enough cyber resilience in the energy sector, to combat, cyber attacks and things like that. So for me, I'd say it's definitely resilience. So understanding, what the risks are, understanding what sorts of, so for us, we look at, across the EU, for example, what sorts of attacks are we seeing? Are they state-sponsored attacks? Are they, just, random, random attacks and things like that? So it's understanding, what the resilience, kind of framework looks like, what is, what is required in order to combat that. So I would say, it's mostly resilience from our perspective.
And I think with that really makes sense because of resilience. And I think now that COVID is happening and we're all at home, there is so much chances for risks because it's harder to implement some information security policies. So that's quite interesting. So I'll definitely say if you are interested in public sector, do research resilience. And I liked what you said about state-sponsored attacks and kind of understanding the dynamics between the UK and the EU and thinking more globally, I think.
And just to add to that as well, if any of your listeners are looking into getting into cyber in the public sector, I think it's important to also understand what is important in terms of from a government perspective, what sorts of what are we thinking about, what is the government of the day, looking at where does cyber sit in their kind of portfolio in terms of their priorities as well. So I think that'd be really good to look at.
Thank you for that. Now we're looking at our fourth question. So you don't have to tell me an exact number, but for especially those who are thinking of going into public sector and maybe trying to, of course, look at cyber security and especially, what are the salary expectations for the field?
Now with the public sector, obviously, very limited money, as is the public purse. So I would say it also depends on what grade, the person is coming into. So there are different ranks in terms of you can start as an executive officer, work your way to higher executive officer, etc. But I'd say I'd give a range, yeah. So I'd say about 25,000 upwards. That also depends on what government department you work in, as it varies within the different government departments. So I'd say around there. I'd say in late 20,000 upwards.
Okay, so like if you're interested in getting an entry role, you should be looking at 25. And I think what's also quite interesting that I know of public sector, because that's also my background, is it depends on your region as well.
Exactly, yeah, definitely. So if you're in London, you might get a bit more. And there's other parts. So for example, we have in my department quite a big basis in Scotland. So that would obviously depend, it would differ what you end there than London, etc. But everything's changing now with working from home and COVID and things. So it'd be interesting to see how that's affected.
Same here, actually. It would be interesting because I think with that, especially with the London waiting, we'll see if that's going to stay or if that's going to go. So definitely do watch the space for that. It's been so interesting, like talking to you. And like I said, like I really find your background very interesting. What advice would you give someone who is either entering or transitioning into cybersecurity?
That's really interesting. I think for me, it was really clear to understand why I wanted to, enter cyber. Understand your motivations, I would say, and what your trajectory is. Understand where you're trying to be in terms of your cyber career. Research, as you said, and we've covered in this discussion, research what is required to enter your field. If it's whether it be qualifications, whether it be other transferable skills. I think also, speak to people. For me, it was really good to, as from a policy background, it was really important for me to speak to people to understand, what sorts of how to, you know, put my competencies together, for example, you know, how to ensure that I'm able to match my my background and my skills to the job that I am applying for. So I think definitely research, understand, you know, what your strong suits are. Certainly in the public sector now, you know, we look at things like behaviors. So, you know, what are your, you know, your strong skill sets? What do you think that you need to work on? And, you know, I think definitely just do research and know, you know, what is required and what you want to do, I'd say.
Thank you. So you heard it, folks. 2 things: research and network. Speak to people to get that extra information. Now that we're in the topic of speaking to people, let's say our listeners want to reach out to you. What is the best way they can?
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me, I'm on LinkedIn. I think that would be the best way to reach out to me. So Sherifah Lahan, Sherifah. Are you able to put it up somehow? And then Lahan is Lahan. Yeah, reach out to me on there. That would be the best way.
Right. Thank you so much again. And don't worry, guys. The description, I will include her LinkedIn for you guys to connect with her. Thank you so much again for coming on our platform and talking with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.